Fáilte go Baboró International Children's Arts Festival. What a joy it is to be with Aisling O'Hucka, the Executive Artistic Director of Baboró, to celebrate an incredible 25 years. And what a joy it is, Aisling, to be in an actual theatre surrounded by wonderful people, wonderful crew, and delighted to see everyone in person. So thank you for this morning.
Not at all. It's fantastic to be here, as you say, and to be able to finally celebrate some of this work in person.
Gosh, and Aisling, when did you join the team in Baboró?
I joined in 2015, so
wow.
So six years ago. So this is my sixth festival, and we had a Wide Eyes Creative Europe Festival, a little bonus festival for early years back in February 2018 as well. So.
And as a Galwegian, what was your first experience of Baboró?
I actually, when I'm so old that I wasn't around when Baboró was around. I wasn't a child or indeed a teenager, but I was lucky enough, I suppose, to that my parents brought me to some theatre and to some music concerts when I was growing up. So I was very, very lucky to be in that position. But I remember coming across Baboró just before I began in Galway in Ennis, actually, where I worked for a number of years. And I did a stint as a venue manager in the Town Hall Theatre. So I got to see all of these children with their families and schools coming into shows, and I was just blown away by their reaction, their engagement, and the work that was being made. So I had a fantastic Baboró experience, and then I went on and worked elsewhere around the country in various different venues and art centres, and then was lucky enough to apply and get the dream job and come back to Galway with my family. So that was wonderful, and I've really enjoyed the experience ever since.
And I guess as the artistic director, as the executive director, but also as a mum, to see Baboró from so many different perspectives. What do your children make of this incredible job that you do?
Absolutely, yeah, it's been fantastic. They were quite young when we came back. Yeah. They're just at the upper end of Baboró now. My son Donica is 12, so they both love and hate October because I disappear, but then they get to see wonderful shows and to be involved in it as well. They've certainly had a great experience, and it's been a real positive about coming back to Galway as a family. Not only Baboró, but the wealth of artistic experiences that we get to enjoy just by living in this fantastically creative city. So
it's amazing. I moved to Galway from Denmark in 2001 and took up position as County Arts Officer, and one of my first meetings was with Baboró. And I was blown away by the size and scale of what was being achieved. But let's talk about Baboró and its evolution, because it started off as a festival. It's become a home for artists, a place of development, a place of encouragement, a place of support, commissioner, producer, co-creator, and international festival. So could you maybe talk us through just the evolution of the entire, I can't even call it a festival anymore.
I suppose the festival, as you know, came out of what was Galway Arts Festival at the time, a summer festival that has now become Galway International Arts Festival. So at the time, Patricia Ford was director, and when she was out seeing work in Europe and around the world, she was seeing some fantastic children's work as well, and was noticing that the audience for the Arts Festival was changing. There were a lot of families with young children engaging with the festival, so she began to bring some of that programming to Galway. And then there was such an appetite for it, and Jean Parkinson, I think, approached to propose that perhaps they go it alone and bring the festival into what has become Baboró International Arts Festival for children. But there was a very conscious decision made at the time to bring it into the school year, so that there was a real equity of access, and that's been a really important part and continues to be a really important part of the festival. And the rights of the child, the rights of every child to access art and to participate in arts and to have their voices heard. So that's something that we as a team go back to all the time in terms of how the decisions that we make and the kind of programming that we make and the access that we try to ensure for all children. And then I guess over the years, with various different directors have brought it on different journeys.
Yeah.
There's always been a mentoring element to it. And certainly Lally Morris, who was director for a long time, had that very nurturing kind of nature. And Branner Theatre de Fáistí, one of our most accomplished and renowned companies, which is based here in Galway. Mark McLaughlin, I know, would reference seeing work in Baboró over the years. James Reardon of Brew Theatre, who's involved in Rise, would reference also having seen work, and building networks. I suppose that's a really important part of the kind of ecosystem that's developed in the west of Ireland that has linkages abroad. The Baboró became involved in the first Creative Europe project, focusing on early years work in 2009, and we've continued with that, and we now are involved in our fourth large-scale European project, focusing particularly on making work for little ones from 0 to 6 years, which has become a real kind of area of specialism, I suppose, for the festival and for some of the companies based in Galway. And that work also works really well for an audience of children with additional needs, and that's an area that we're really, really interested in as well, in terms of that equity of provision for children. And in recent years, I suppose, yes, we have become more involved and more interested in co-commissioning, in co-producing. I mean, we've particularly in the last 2 years, through the pandemic and through the Galway 2020 project, the shift, there's been a big shift, a huge learning curve, and it's been really, really interesting, really challenging, and it's really stretched us all, but in a really good way. And I think it means that the organisation is now in a place where it can move forward and really push the boundaries, I suppose, of the kind of work that's being made in Ireland.
And in relation to Rise was the incredible programme, obviously, that Baboró and Galway 2020 co-commissioned, and obviously with all of the artists and the organisations you worked with, the creation of so much work during the pandemic. Can we talk a little bit about the challenges and the opportunities in the creation of that programme? Because it was a programme of remarkable work.
That's right. So Rise is a collection really of 4 projects, if you like, with children at the heart. And I suppose I was very conscious as we approached the European Capital of Culture 2020 and Galway and the citizens of Galway having this amazing opportunity, a once in a lifetime opportunity to have a European Capital of Culture designation. And I was very conscious of children and young people and the potential impact that something like this could have on them. We as a festival would approach it not necessarily in bringing a work of huge scale for children. That's something that we do on an annual basis, but actually giving children and young people an opportunity to be involved, to be artists themselves, to meet artists of repute and work in a kind of a professional way, if you like, a semi-professional way with these artists. And also very conscious that we are in a fantastically creative city and the western fringes of Europe, but knowing from being at festivals in Europe that there's a really natural kind of collaborative approach, and there's a real exchange, artistic exchange that happens really naturally, really organically, by people just driving down 2 hours down the motorway in a van and suddenly making work with another company in another country. And that's much, much more difficult for us to do here just because of geography. So I was really conscious of the fantastic artists here also having an opportunity to collaborate and to develop those kind of networks and what could come out of that. So we ended up with 4 different projects that are very different,
but they really sit quite well together because of your vision and your approach. They work as an entire programme, which is fantastic.
It was really focusing on children as co-creators.
As co-creators.
Was the main focus, and giving them voice. And the notion of Rise was of kind of children rising up and being heard. So I think the projects obviously had to change dramatically. We had many Zooms.
Which is why it's so lovely to be here in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody who's been involved in the project has spent a lot of time in spare rooms from as far away as, Shantla, all the way over to Melbourne. in Australia to The Hague in Holland, and all of the artists involved and the children and the families and the teachers, the parents have been incredible and have just said, yeah, we'll do that. And everybody kept going. There was a real appetite, I suppose, to find ways, innovative ways of continuing to reach children and to work together despite all the odds.
And I think when the vision is so strong, the work will continue. And I think that's one of the things that we're really looking forward to finding out a little bit more about RISE. Aisling, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you, and thank you so much for the work that you've done with not just Baboró, but the contribution that you've made to the arts and to the lives of artists and children on Náille and indeed in Ireland and across Europe. So thank you so much, Aisling.
Thanks very much, Marlon.
The St. Pat's Lockdown Olympics. Yeah!
I mean, some of it was bananas. Kids were kind of just using all those objects in really amazingly creative ways.
Oh yes, you got a great start. 6 feathers. That means 6 jumping jacks. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you have to be really creative. Like sweatiest sport, like weirdest sport.
Hello and welcome to the Weird Wacky Running Race.
The title of this is the race that's going to drive Mum over the edge.
The whack, corona, into the bin.
Chicken.
Come here for Carl, everybody, please! Yeah! Play the birds, well done. High five. 3, 2, 1, high five!
It's cool to try and make a sport by yourself with things you wouldn't really see in sports. It's kind of like making a piece of art and hope that your sport becomes a professional sport and people play it. There's been a lot of interviews and a lot of videos, so I think it could go viral across the world.
Yeah! Yeah! Yeah!
Delighted to talk about RISE. RISE was the Galway 2020 Baboró series of projects for the European Capital of Culture year. The entire programme was commissioned and designed and co-created by Baboró in partnership and collaboration with many artists and organisations. Artistic excellence at its beating heart and the child at the centre of everything in the entire programme, and allowing the child's voice and presence to rise up. One of the projects is of enormous interest and great fun, might I add, St. Pat's Lockdown Olympics, and delighted to be joined by the wonderful James Reardon as Brúthíochta on Náille, and indeed Darren O'Donnell, Artistic Director and Founding Director of Mammalian Diving Reflex, all the way from Melbourne. And we did think we'd got away from Zoom, but no, we haven't. So delighted to welcome you online, and James, you in person. So we'd love to learn more about this amazing project. And before we do, I'd like to just ask you a little bit about yourself, James. You're from Galway, but you did burst back onto the scene in 2017, 2018. And might I say that I feel like you've been here for decades because you've had such an impact in all of our lives over the last couple of years. And what a joy it is and a pleasure to have you in the fabric, the absolute beating heart of the creative and cultural community in Galway, because you've been fantastic to work with on everything. So tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you very much. I'm Artistic Director with Brew Theatre, which is here in Galway, and we set ourselves up in 2018. And so in the last few years, we've been making work for all ages, I would say. And yeah, it's been really good. I mean, Galway 2020, the timing of me coming back was quite fortuitous. and I've been involved in lots of different things, and with the great Baboró for the last few years on different projects, along with some other Galway 2020 projects, and yeah, we're in the middle of making a new piece for this festival this year, and have lots of other projects up on the go, so yeah.
And when you came back, Clitsu was one of the projects that actually you interacted with Baboró as well in 2018, was it? Or?
Yeah, so that was our first show with Brew Theatre, which was based on the superstitions of kind of fishing communities on the west of Ireland. And so we were taking, you know, contemporary theatre practices around full mask and site-specific to fishing cottages. So we made it first for Galway Theatre Festival, and then spoke with Baboró and kind of reimagined it for younger audiences. And yeah, we were part of the festival. That is 3 years ago now. Yeah.
And your lovely relationship with Baboró continues right into St. Pat's Lockdown Olympics.
Sure does.
And Darren, we'd love to learn more about you and your company and what you do.
Sure. Well, my company is called Mammalian Diving Reflex. We're a performing arts company working with. We sort of drifted by accident because of the success of this one project, Haircuts by Children, a million years ago in 2006. Because that went so well, a lot of people wanted to hear from us again in creating work with children for an adult audience. And that's sort of been our specialty, is bringing children together with adults in sort of strange circumstances and creating more like events, less like theater performances. And then we do other work too. We've got a project that we do with people who are over the age of 65. So there's a range of projects. The main thing is that we're often working with non-artists and bringing together populations of people that wouldn't ordinarily be together to sort of look at things that we wouldn't ordinarily look at together. Trying to find new ways of being together is sort of how we describe it. So been doing that, and mostly do that internationally in performing arts festivals around the world. And we've been doing that for quite a while now, yeah, since 1993.
Wow. And how did the two of you come to collaborate on this project? Anyone?
You, James?
Well, I mean, I was kind of late to the party in terms of the project was started with Darren and Baboró before I kind of was involved. So I don't know when you guys first came together.
Well, in terms of our relationship with James, because the idea back in the day when there were things like airplanes in the sky, back then, I was going to come in at a couple points and we would work together, and then James would be able to sustain it while I wasn't there. What this happened with COVID, now it was, James having to lead most of it. And I mean, I have to say that one of the best collaborators that I've ever had. I've fallen in love with him, and I hope that we get to work together in person in the future. And it was so easy. It was so beautiful. The thing that I just want to say this, the thing that I love about James, and that is the same as me, is we love short meetings. And we love quick meetings. You get to the point, you talk about what you need to get to, and then you're off. That's my favorite. He's the best in the world for that. I would say that he's the best meeting man I've ever met. So it has been great working with him, because when you're on Zoom all the time, you don't want to be blathering on about how everybody's dealing with COVID. You just want to get to the point, and it's been great working with him on that front.
Right back at you, Darren.
And you both collaborated with St. Patrick's National School here in the city. Can you tell us a little bit about the school itself and the children in it?
So the school itself is in the middle of the city, right beside Galway, the market, on a Saturday, and it's primarily boys. They've started to bring girls into the younger classes, but the classes we were interested in working with were kind of boys classes, and kind of trying to get deeper and more meaningful access to art with groups of boys.
And what age group were you working with?
So we were looking at 3rd, 4th and 5th class. And so kind of like 9-ish, 8, 9 up. And the original idea was that we would go in and kind of do an after school kind of setup where we would effectively make a new team for a new sport that we would make with them, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of having these funny discussions around like how do you find those kids, and how do you engage with them, and how do you make teams out of when they're kind of a little bit confused as to what exactly they'll be doing on a team. So we had a bit of those kind of conversations originally before the pandemic came to scupper everything.
But I think that the fact that the boys were involved in the co-creation and design and very much an intrinsic part of the project meant that they were really at the heart of it. And maybe in the long term it means that that interest has been generated and that you've done something very special. You've done something that's at the beating heart of what Baboró has done in Galway for the last 25 years, by including children in the design and co-creation of work. But to get back to the project and that process of co-creation, can you give me some examples of, what it was like to work with the boys, how engaged they were?
Yeah, sure. So it was kind of two-sided in terms of, originally the piece was called For the Love of Sweat, and so I was in the school doing some kind of sport, but trying to do like sporty workshops, but they would make their own rules, or trying to encourage this idea of not thinking inside soccer, but starting to kind of break out of that into other ways of playing. And so then the pandemic happened and everything shifted. And so we had to really kind of have a total rethink in terms of how we could maintain the essence of what we were trying to do, which is that it's coming from the young people. We're there to facilitate it, but and to encourage it and to maybe push it on a little bit, but it comes from them. And when we had to change into an online format, we really had to think about how to most effectively do that, especially in kind of Zoom fatigue land, and when the children are at home on their computers. And playing sports when they're at home and can't see other people. There was a lot of things to think about, really.
And how did that work in terms of the actual logistics and production? How involved were the teachers? How involved were the parents?
So, well, they, it had to have buy-in from everybody.
Yes.
And so what we came to eventually was the St. Pat's Lockdown Olympics. And so the concept was that we would send packages every week home to their houses, and we would give them an example Olympic, let's say bowling or relay or racing, or so we would send them kind of a little outline, but we would be sending them things like cat pooper scoopers and weird wires and kind of strange sticky myth thing, like googly eyes, just lots of different, I suppose random in one way, things in a box. And so they would then have to create their version of these sports, and they would then film them, put them back to the teacher would send them to us, we'd look at them, we had a whole scoring system, we chose to work with fourth class eventually, so we had two fourth classes almost competing, and we were giving out points, but like the points was very much at our discretion in terms of who had the best cameo from a brother, and so you'd have a kind of brother in the back just randomly just kind of fixing something, and he would be the winner. And we had a lot of fun in terms of how we could frame it, and I think that fun then translated back into the films we would make and send them back to the children. So every week they would get a video from us letting them know who was winning, or what does winning even mean in terms of this level of a sport. And then Darren, it must be said, had much better production value than I did, and he would make these really out there videos in the sunshine while we were in the rain in Ireland. I was in my sitting room being like, welcome back everybody. But yeah, it kind of really took off in terms of the engagement we had the first video versus what we had in the fourth video, both in terms of teachers and children really went up and up and up, which I think was encouraging for us to know that it was landing. Yeah. And then you're getting these really Banana Town kind of sports, but also you're getting to see the whole evolution of what you've started, and as the weeks go on it must have grown and developed and just become more and more creative and more fun. What was the highlight of the experience for you both?
Well, for me, there was one of the students, he decided, he made games, which was great, but he actually was there to show off his video production skills. And he had high-end production skills. And it was really fun to get this guy's video and see all of the different things that they would do, the different titles that he would do. And then there was and then the use of siblings and parents also was very beautiful to see, little brothers and little sisters participating in the game, and then mom participating in the game. That was all really nice to see. That was some of my favorite moments.
And I guess that's one of the things, I suppose, during lockdown was the inclusion and participation of family. And I know I have 3 daughters, and we, my eldest, made 2 pieces of theatre during lockdown, and we were all involved in many different ways, even if we didn't really want to be, but we were included, and it was just a fantastic experience. Just a final word in relation to, will we see another collaboration between you 2 great guys in the future?
I mean, it would be great.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, it would be great. Let's.
I mean, I'm so genuine. I really loved working with you, James. It was every moment was pleasure and easy, and that's not usually the case. So I really had such a great time. You for me, you were the big discovery, and hopefully a friend for life if we can ever get into the same place at the same time.
Sounds good. Yeah, and well, I mean, for me, it was an amazing opportunity because the work he's making is amazing. And when I got, you know, there was a call out for a local artist, and I was successful. And so there was real excitement around the idea that I would learn from you and we would collaborate on a level. And I think I'm really delighted that we actually did manage to, it felt like a genuine collaboration, what we got to, even though everything was sideways and backwards and
so challenging.
Yeah, but actually I think we, as you say, we got on very well. It was kind of not easy in terms of it being like a mind, you know, like trying to figure out how to do this. But every time we spoke, it was good and easy and positive. And just to say,
I also want to point out, so I was the international guy brought in to do this fancy thing, and you were the local guy. But I have to say, in all sincerity, you're a better artist than I am. I watch Brew, and I look at your Instagram stuff, and I look at things. You guys are way better than anything that I've ever done. So congratulations.
Sure about that.
Well, it was an honor to work with you, honestly.
Darren, you're very welcome to the enormous Baboró family, because I think that's one of the things that certainly I've learned about Baboró over the years, that once you become part of the festival, you become part of this enormous Baboró family all over the world, where all these wonderful partnerships and collaborations turn into friendships, and they last a lifetime. So guys, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to talk to you both and to learn more about this beautiful project and to get to know you both a little bit more, and hopefully as part of the ever-growing Baboró family, we'll see more of you in the future. So, gur maithagí.
Thank you, Darren.
Yeah, I hope to see you in person sometime soon. I'm double vaxxed, so I'll be there soon.
Keep the mustache, keep the mustache.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, James.
Thank you very much, Marlon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Children are dancing really from the womb, and I think there's it's an innate understanding of the way we move and the colour and the richness that brings, and that it doesn't require an explanation. There's a sort of uninhibited beauty, particularly to that age of sort of primary school, where they're not self-conscious yet. They can move however they like and not feel that it should be one way or another. It's just sort of the way they move, and it's a real brightness to watch.
Delighted to be here with Jessica Kennedy from Junk Ensemble, who created the wonderful The Veiled Ones, which was part of the RISE programme for Baboró in partnership with Galway 2020. Jessica, thank you so much for the incredible work that you've done and that you've achieved in this project. Would you like to tell us a little bit about you and about Junk Ensemble?
I'm co-artistic director of Junk Ensemble with my twin sister, Megan Kennedy. And we founded the company in 2004 in Dublin, coming from dance and theatre directions. My sister trained, Megan trained in Edinburgh, I trained in London in dance. She did theatre. We came and started making work quite visual, quite theatrical. We pin it as dance theatre. And we grew as a company from making duets, mostly with us performing in them. And then that grew and we got bigger funding and more funding, and now some of our productions are quite big. We work very closely with other collaborators and designers, so the collaboration is key to our process. And working with these designers to influence and develop the piece alongside with the performers.
Wow. And so you set the company up with your twin sister. Were you inspired as children in terms of theatre and dance? Where did that passion and drive come from?
Our father was a drama professor in the States first, and then he was working at Trinity, so he was head of drama there, which is why we all moved over. So we were exposed to a lot of theatre productions and other artists, and we've been dancing since we were 5. So that process alongside with literature and film has all influenced our work now.
Very strongly. And how did the relationship with Baboró come about? How was that born?
We applied for, alongside with Baboró, it's a commission, so we applied to the Arts Council for this piece called The Veiled Ones, which is also a Tracks commission, so it was in partnership with Cork Midsummer Festival and Dublin Fringe Festival, and we were successful with that funding. And then we did a residency 2 years ago. We're artists in residence here, and worked with the designer, and the show was meant to happen last year, but it's amazing that it's happening now and happening this year. So premiered in Dublin Fringe, and now the kind of final, the best installation is now happening in the Black Box in
Galway.
Galway.
Fantastic. We're really looking forward. And tell us a little bit about The Veiled Ones. How did it come about? What's it about? And who's involved?
The original starting point is Roald Dahl's The Witches, his children's novel, children's book, and we were interested in the play and the gruesome element to that, but not the negative connotation around the witches. So it's more of an unpacking or an adaptation, reimagining of the book. So we are looking at witches, transformations. It's a defense of the witch, and the powerful relationship between the grandparent and the grandchild. So that element has come straight out of the book. This really, really cool grandmother who has this lovely relationship with her grandson, and how they develop, and her mischievousness. So we have the spaces, we have 4 different spaces that are influenced and informed by Roald Dahl's work. The audience sit in the center, and then they move around in an anti-clockwise fashion to look at each of the different spaces, and they're all quite different. And the idea of nature and growth is something that we have as a strong theme running through. So the idea that this connection to nature, play, intrigue, things that that children connect with.
Wow. And in terms of the children and the interaction that you've had, is this the first body of work that you've made with children, or have you engaged with the child as an audience and artist in the past?
We've worked with children in many of our productions, 6 or 7. Since 2008 was our first production, where they are performers but also collaborators in the process. So we've done quite large scale pieces, one called The Falling Song, which had a children's choir, and we had a different choir wherever we toured to. That had quite a big UK and Irish tour. Bird with Boy, it was 6 dancers, boy dancers from a dance company called Company B. And they actually made the work with us, and then we cast them locally when we did a UK tour and an Irish tour as well. So we really enjoy working with children and working with a younger audience, and that their role is really important within the creation process, and that's really exciting for us to get that viewpoint and for them to have that ownership.
Because there's so many art forms, intergenerational. It just sounds like such a fantastic project. What are the challenges of working with such diversity of age group and genre?
Challenge is really like we have to have chaperones. It's not really much of a challenge. You have less rehearsal time, but
Yes.
we see them more as advantages, particularly with the age group between Finola Cronin, who would be in her mid-60s, and then the younger performers are 12, and seeing their relationship develop and seeing the influences between the other cast members. The twins absolutely love the cast, and they've made they kind of forced their parents to do this run of the show because they're double gigging. They're in another show in Dublin because they just love being around and being sort of part of the process from the beginning.
There's a very high level of partnership and collaboration across this particular project. You mentioned tracks. Do you want to go into that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, so the show was meant to premiere in Cork Midsummer, but it couldn't happen. But Cork Midsummer, Dublin Fringe and Baboró all came together for this co-commission. And it's been a 2-year process, which has been great, so that we had the first year 2 years ago to have a residency with the designer, and then we had an online residency with the designer and the dramaturg during the pandemic. And Baboró has just been very involved within the process and securing venues and involved in the creation of the work.
And all of the excitement and challenge and opportunity that comes with creating work during the pandemic. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you sustained that level of partnership during the pandemic?
We kept as much going online. It was mostly postponing. And we did 2-week design residency, which was great. It's difficult over Zoom, and it's difficult for dance because you can't really do dance rehearsals on Zoom. We tried. We did a lot of film, and we were able to sustain ourselves that way in terms of actually working with people in a physical space. But until last March, when Dance House reopened in Dublin, and we started rehearsing for real, the rest was just kind of faffing around. I realized, we were working, but like it wasn't real work once we're actually, in a physical space. So that's been amazing to have back again, and it's just sort of been living off that, breathing real air with real people. It's inspiring to be back.
And the joy of what you do requires that in-person, that presence, that space, that people coming together to do what you do. And it must be wonderful to be back in theatre.
It is, yes. And I mean, wonderful to have live musicians as well, because we have 2 musicians that perform in the work. So even just, I know the piece, but I'm dancing around to the music and getting into it, because it's lovely to have it all together back in, and great to see the audience's reaction to that. The children are really engaging with the music and the live music element, and it's interesting to see them, because each of the 4 spaces are so distinct, to see what particularly they connect to.
Jessica, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, and we're really excited to see the Veiled Ones, so thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It was really focused from the start on it being their work, their thing, and their output.
You kind of are freestyle. It's not like you have a strict thing to copy. It's like you can kind of move on your own beat. Dancing makes me feel free, happy, relaxed. I kind of like let the air take me. I just kind of let the wind take me to do my moves. Just let like my mind go and just do some things with my body, make different shapes and stuff. Dancing is a lot of things. Dancing is happiness. dancing is exercise. Dancing is about expressing yourself. Dancing is about tip your toes.
Delighted to continue the conversation about RISE and this wonderful programme between Galway 2020 Capital of Culture, European Capital of Culture, and Baboró. The Streets Are Ours is absolutely one of the highlights and one of the most wonderful examples of partnership and collaboration I think I've ever seen. And it's just such a beautiful project. And really delighted to introduce Isabella Mello from Galway Community Circus, Fionnuala Doyle Wade from Galway Dance Project, and Eric Cale from Arch8 in the Netherlands. Galway Community Circus and Galway Dance Project, obviously two renowned Galway-based organisations, but very much plugged in a European context. So really delighted to meet the three of you together. And love to hear a little bit more about The Streets Are Ours. So how did this collaboration come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, it's so long ago now, you have to think back where the roots of it were. But our company has originally made, in the Netherlands, we've made a lot of work for young audiences, but we'd also done a lot of stuff in public space. We just found that an interesting space for audiences to have a sort of different relationship to the work. And I think in the most loving way, I really love an Irish audience because the kids are so boisterous that like they're ready to have a different relationship to the work. They just need permission. And so I thought it'd be a really good fit. And so we were talking about that possibility. We were over here performing other work as part of Baboró. And so yeah, it just became a moment to sort of chat with one another about how we could make that happen. And what I was really excited about is very often you get flown in and you're meant to work like for a week with young people and then they show something and it happens, but I feel like it doesn't embed in their lives and their muscle memory the way a sort of longer term project can. And also when you have local collaborators, then you know that some of the ideas or the things you're working on will have a life beyond this project, that it's not only about this one moment, but it's about the longer path for each artist who works with young people.
I love the way you mention roots. How long has this project been in development?
Well, it's more like 2 years ago we had the audition, so I would say maybe 3 years ago probably I started talking to Ashnan about it, and yeah, that it's been in development for a long time, and it's of course it's been an amphibious process because it began in reality and then we had to shift to the screens for a time, and now we've come back full circle back to reality. And you know, Johan Cruyff, the famous Dutch footballer, he has this elke voordeel heeft zijn nadelen, which is like every advantage has its disadvantage and every disadvantage has its advantages. And there is something like you feel a real three-dimensionality to the practice of what the kids are doing because it's had so many different phases and it's been a part of their lived experience. And sometimes where a child might sometimes lose enthusiasm over a longer process, like when there's nothing on and you're stuck at home, it's like, ooh, that fun thing I get to do that's not homework, or you know, sit quietly because dad has to work in the other room. So I think that you know, there were advantages as well to the process. But I have to say, yesterday I was back in the studio for the first time with the students, and it's wonderful because these ladies have prepped them so well, and that you really see how comfortable the young people are because there's a sort of familiar presence who they've had in their lives on a regular basis, doing so that they're ready to step into this weird space. But they're all 15, 20 centimeters taller than when we started the project. It's amazing. Like it's, you know, like, are you the older brother of the kid I saw at the audition? Which is lovely that you see it's part of, they're.
So let's talk a little bit about the making of the work and the co-creation that was involved in terms of the three organisations and for the three of you as artists and facilitators, and then the kids. So I'd love to hear a little bit more. Isabella?
Yeah, so I started a bit later in the part. I wasn't in the in-person part. I started with the virtual one, which was a bit interesting because I didn't know exactly what they were doing before, but it was quite surprising that we managed to do like I mean, the workshops and the whole idea of the video and everything through online rehearsals. So that was quite interesting. But I think they know more about how it was before than I do.
Yeah, so I got it brought in 2019. I had applied through an open call. So the project was already a seed or an idea that had been pretty established at that stage, and brought in to learn from Eric and then also help and facilitate with the group of kids. So I got to be there in person with Eric back 2 years ago and see how he worked, and right away like really was inspired by his energy and by kind of the amazing wildness in the children that was brought out through allowing them to just basically be themselves, do what they want, and feel like a sense of creative ownership in what they were doing. And then, we brought it online to Zoom sessions and kind of tried to continue with that energy online.
How do you keep that energy going during lockdown and the creation of such, as you say, such boisterous children, and that level of energy that is needed and required on a Zoom? I mean, what's the secret behind making something like that?
I think it was really beautiful. It was that you were already saying to them, use their spaces, or we were supposed to be using the streets of Galway. And on Zoom in a dance class, if you're asking them to clear their space and try and make loads of room to move, it's just not going to work. And it's frustrating for them. So what we did was say, use your space, use your walls, use your couches, stand on your tables, stand on your chairs, collaborate with your space. So it's not a frustration, it's not a hindrance. It's allowing them to really feel comfortable and do what they want.
To explore their own creativity within that space and the architecture of that space. And I guess dance is really about how we engage with the architecture of space and how we move within it. I just think that the project, talk about the evolution then from the room to the street.
Yeah, that's well, honestly, we're going from the room to the parking lot because it's just bureaucratic regulations at the moment make it impossible to do the sort of public manifestation. Like we had this dream of a sort of Pied Piper in reverse, that the kids lead the grown-ups out of town instead of the other way around. No, so what we're doing now is just working for a few days intensely with the young people to sort of build a score together with them, and just to give that sense of ownership, that they can make choices inside of the score and that they have real sensitivity to each other, and it's really there. And what's so lovely is they're exactly at that cusp. Like if COVID had gone on another year, they'd be at the beginning of puberty and really self-conscious, and this would have been really difficult. But they have that beautiful, like sometimes an 11-year-old comes across as a 30-year-old and the 12-year-old comes across as like 8 again or something, because there's just that sort of shift that happens, and they're really in that sweet spot right now, and it's lovely to see. And they really have a trust with one another too. Like they don't know each other that well personally, but just I think because it's a professional product, they see the people around them know what they're doing, that they want to jump on board that train and see where the train will take them, and take the wheel once in a while. And that's what we want to get to, is that spot where they feel that it's theirs.
But I think the way you've approached it means that it very much is theirs. That's what comes across really strongly to me in this body of work. And I think your facilitation and your support and your direction and your vision, your collaborative, creative vision for this has been really, really strong. That really comes across in the work. And let's talk a little bit more about the co-creation between the three organisations and the kids. Fionnuala, like I know the...
So I suppose a lot of the co-creation started when Eric came over, and just meeting up with Eric and then being in a room with him and moving with him and all the kids, and then it kind of continued through Zoom because it was pretty fast that it was obvious that we weren't going to be in person during COVID. I mean, it was just conversations, I suppose, happening, and then when Isabella came on, transferring that knowledge and
and I think we are also, we're always fed by videos from Pauline from the arcade as well. So we had an idea of what we were supposed to do, but we also knew the challenge of being in the little screen. So then, for me at least, I didn't want that they felt like it was mandatory and like at school, that you have to be there, but if it was a game and it was something joyful, so then so we kind of got what they gave to us and kind of mixed a bit with some games and some fun things, and then
And how many children were involved in the entire process from beginning to end?
Maybe 30 or so in the whole process, but we have like 7 or 8 now who are actually going to be here in this final physical thing, and that just makes sense. You know, kids start a sport or do other things in the meantime. That, but there were more. It's been a sort of tapering off, but not out of lack of enthusiasm, just schedule difficulties.
And life.
Exactly.
You know, life. Because as you said, you know, these kids were 2 years younger when you started, 3 years younger in some cases, and I know myself, I've 3 at those different stages. It's not easy, and they tend to change their minds and move and grow within it. In terms of future conversations, where does this go now? Dare I ask?
No, I was actually sitting today thinking about that, and I was thinking, you know, it would be fun to come back at some point and just with you two alone in a room and make a duet, like use the stuff we learned from the kids and make something that you could go perform in schools or sort of like performance and workshop, because very often ArchAid sort of creates works that they create a warm space between the performers, but one that eventually invites the audience in to participate in one way or another. There's almost never a fourth wall, and how that can work. And it's definitely got my wheels turning about how we could do that in the future somehow.
And also being part of that extended Baboró family that I tend to talk about. It's the way that the festival nurtures relationships and collaborations that become friendships and lead to other things. I mean, I've seen it over my 20-odd year relationship with the festival. I've seen some of the same people come back in different ways, and, you know, people who were once upon a time audience are now artists, which I think is very special to see the first generation of artists emerge in Galway from Baboró. So in terms of what we can expect with the streets are ours, what can the viewers expect with this?
I think it's just this little society. It's like in any performance, like the rules of the world of that performance are different than the rules of everyday life. And part of it is just your curiosity of seeing it happen, but also in a little way like jazz musicians. Like if I say they're making it up as they go along, you think like, oh, there's no planning whatsoever. There's a score, there's a sort of line underneath, but there's space inside that for what occurs in the moment in relation to the weather, a passerby, or something that the audience does. And I think that's a real beautiful thing about sort of real-time composition, is that you just see the imagination of children is like, it's like they've had 10 Red Bulls compared to the imagination of an adult. And so it's so lovely to see the things that come out of them and how they spark one another, and that sort of chain reaction in the little community of the performers on the
But also for
event.
the three of you of artists, I mean, I've been a student of Isabella's, and she's an incredible facilitator, and my gosh, I mean, you're just really gifted at what you do. And I had an incredible experience, and I'm, you know, an adult who's way older than I should be doing what I was doing with Isabella. But just the experience these kids have had with the three of you has been absolutely phenomenal. And it comes across the joy, the love, the appreciation, the art. It comes across so strongly in this project. And I really hope that we get an opportunity to see these three great minds come together with more little great creative minds into the future. It's such a beautiful project, and thank you all so much.
I would just like to highlight one thing that one of the kids said. For a long time, one of the kids were not participating in the Zoom classes, and the mom came to talk to us that she was a bit like nervous, you know, she was a bit like, oh, I don't know if she's gonna participate or not. And then in the filming day, she was still a bit shy. And so the mom stayed there because she was like, I'm gonna stay here, you know, just to like bring the confidence. And then when we start to film, like she suddenly like, whoa, you know, and start to dance like crazy. And I was like, is this the girl who is shy? And then afterwards she came to us and said, before I didn't trust myself to do the things I do, but now I do trust myself. So I was like, oh, that's so lovely. Yeah.
But I think I just think the magic of what you've captured at such a crucial age in their lives for self-expression, development and confidence has been phenomenal. And that really comes across in the work. And that story just sums up this project for me in every way. It's just beautiful. Oh, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. sincere thank you to all of the artists that we met with Rise. I just think it's such a fantastic project, and what a wonderful programme to have been curated and commissioned by Baboró and produced and co-created and developed and initiated. Such a sincere thank you to you, Aisling, and to Jen and Thomas and the team for an incredible body of work in the most difficult and trying of circumstances. And welcome back to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been wonderful just to hear about all of the different projects again, and just to remember, I suppose, the various different iterations that they've been through. And I suppose necessity is the mother of invention. We've definitely seen how innovative and resilient and the artists have been, all of our partners, our producers, our funders, and the support from Galway 2020 and the local authority. And of course there's been so many people behind the scenes who were working away in spare rooms back in deepest, darkest January and February this year in our second lockdown, and zooming in from around the world. And I just want to give credit to those people who stuck with us through thick and thin, and of course the parents, teachers and children, most importantly, who didn't give up on us either. So I think it's a great testament to the project and to all of those involved. And it's been great, growing our networks from our kind of humble home here in Galway, and really being able to create those lasting relationships, I think. And through those conversations this morning, we've seen where hopefully there will be further collaborations and more opportunities for that kind of co-creation going forward.
And I guess earlier on we had an opportunity to look back at the last 25 years, but what do the next 25 years hold in store for Baboró?
Yeah, I think the future is very bright. I think we're in a really great place. Thankfully we have a great team, we have great support. Both from national and local funders and our supporters and corporates. There's never enough. We obviously, I feel very strongly that children's work should be supported and valued in the same way, if not more so, than general work, and that's something that we're not in the best place in that regard. And it's been wonderful to have such support from the Arts Council during these years, but that state funding is really critical. We're meeting audiences and now co-creators at such an influential stage in their development, and as we know, participating in the arts as a young child, even as young as 2 or 3, can really have a fundamental impact on children's lives. It opens up whole new worlds, new languages, new ways of communicating, empathy, thinking outside the box, all of those things that we know that create a really whole and full person and member of our society. So absolutely we would love that support to continue, and for the artists who we are working with in Galway, they really need that support as well. And ultimately, wouldn't it be wonderful if one of the legacies coming out of this period and Galway 2020 European Capital of Culture would have a dedicated cultural space for children in the city, with organisations like Fila de Eves, Creative, Branner, Baboró, Brew Theatre. There are a number of artists bubbling up all over the city. So there's a real ecosystem there and a real focus on making work for this audience in Galway. So having a dedicated space to hold that and to share from and to invite other collaborators and artists too would just be amazing. It
would be absolutely the pinnacle, and the level of collaboration and coming together that happened during the Capital of Culture period was really heartwarming for all of us, I think, for everybody who was involved in what was a really, really difficult journey on many different levels. And to be here today to celebrate projects like Rise and what's been achieved with Baboró in its 25th year is really quite remarkable. And I think that the legacy of all of this is the relationships and the partnerships that have been born, and hopefully that those seeds can now spread across Europe and that this work tours to other capitals of culture, because a lot of eyes have turned to Galway during the pandemic as a model of resilience and brilliance in terms of the continuity of work and the support of artists during the pandemic. And Baboró was so central in allowing so many artists' lives to be sustained and allow all that work to not just survive but thrive in a very supported ecosystem during the pandemic. So it's really quite remarkable to be here today with so many artists. And you and I were saying we're so used to being back there on that side of the camera. For us, it's a little bit uncomfortable being up here. But as you say, a lot of people behind the scenes. The technicians,
absolutely.
the crew, the producers who worked so hard with artists, children and participants that deserve such a huge mention in all of this, because they were the backbone of everything that we all did during that very difficult time.
Oh, absolutely, and huge credit is due to them. And I suppose, you know, these projects have been wonderful. They have just worked with small numbers of children though, you know, and there is so much opportunity. I mean, the level of engagement from St. Pat's School that we worked with locally was huge. And there is a real appetite in schools around the country, you know, from families. And it's really just having the opportunity and I suppose the funding and the support ongoing nationally to be able to reach much more of those children is something that I'd love to see come out of this whole period, because I think we realise now that more than ever, having coming out of a pandemic, how much we rely on the arts and how important they are in all of our lives.
And just a final thank you to Aislinn and the board and the team at Baboró, not just for Rise and for what you've achieved, but for everything that all of you have achieved over the last 25 years. And we really look forward to working with you in every capacity, because it's changed so much over the last couple of years for the next 25 years. So, Cogordigus Argus Gurmila Magat.
Gurmila Magat, Marlon.